So just so you can all relax, that's your take-homes. I do them at the beginning, and then you know, so you can go for, if you go to sleep, that's okay. There's some nice pretty pictures in between you can look at. So in the future, this is what I reckon. I should have 10 commandments. So I thought it'd be a bit more religious, but I couldn't think of the 10th. Although I have thought of the 10th. I reckon number 10, just as an aside, is to have some zonal mix where you actually have your farms if you were designing the perfect outcome, so you can pick up some of the good or bad climate areas. So you've got to understand that climate is changing. Humans are the main cause of it. I won't back away from it, and I can argue till the cows come down, but I won't do that today. Plan for future climate. There'll be more variable and extreme, and that's one of the hardest things in the planning that we're doing, is dealing with those extremes and what we're going to do in those. You have to have confidence that meat and farm production will be part of the future, and we do, and I think in an increasing way. Carbon sense is economic sense. I think if you get your systems right, and it's actually very, by and large, if you can get your carbon intensity right, you've got feed efficiency, and if you've got feed efficiency, you've got a pretty good economic system. Consistently retain 30% per annum in net profits, which we're not there, but it's a struggle. But if you can do that, at the moment we store about a bit over 2,000 tonnes of grain and a lot of hay as our buffer after 2006-07. I was never going there again. And the consultants all tell us you should put your money in the bank and has it as a reserve for that rather than holding actual physical fodder. But if you could get to that on a regular basis, I think you'd be pretty well set. There'll be people in this room that do that quite easily, I suspect. Breed a flexible ewe that can provide multiple income streams, and I'm agnostic about breeds and whether you should be merinos or not. We've gone down a particular path for a variety of reasons, but I acknowledge that everyone, as long as you're passionate in your area and you're committed to it, you can do whatever system that suits you and hopefully your climate area. But I'll explain why we've come to our decision. Emission intensity, you've got to understand your footprint, and you have to have an adaptation plan in place, and more importantly, the plan, you need to act on it. And so if you're not quite there and you did want to review how to go about it, More Lambs More Often program is a terrific one for that. And you need to be flexible, don't chop and change. We go broke when I have mad ideas in the middle of the night and wake up with them and try to change things. If you can avoid that, you're pretty good. So quickly, I'll talk about what motivates us, what we're doing about it, and maybe touch on what we need to do in the future. So I'll fly through some of these. So this is your, you've all seen this. This is from the BOM site. This is the latest 2016 data. You want to run a trend line through it. Oh, I'm on the wrong one. It's jumped. Where's my... hang on. I'm out of sequence. I'm a dill. Okay. This is where I need my arrow. Where's the arrow? Is it that straight one? So I'm 1960, I'm 57, so I'm here. You can put wherever you are on your chain. This is on your left axis here, you've got your mean temperature, and that, for any of those who have followed the politics of where Paris and this conversation about where we're trying to get our emissions to, we've signed off on getting to 2 degrees, although between you and I, the commitments won't actually do it. The commitments are about up here somewhere. But presumably we're going to keep working on them in terms of lowering our greenhouse footprint. And then what they're saying for a safe climate, you should be at 1.5 degrees. But if we keep doing what we're doing now, and we go as business as usual, which is based on going up here, which is on the what they call an RCP 8.5, which is basically means that our emissions will keep continuing as they are now and we don't change them. That's where we're going to end up. And so all I did was presume, I've got 4 kids, and I said they're going to live till, they tell me they're going to live to 100 in their generation, but I put them in the late 80s or 90s. And if we do good action, they'll be in this safe zone. If we don't, you transfer it up here, they're in serious trouble. And if they have children, which they may or may not have, if we don't do things, they're going to be in serious strife. It's fairly sobering. The next one is just a straight line data of what the weather is. You've all seen that, but basically the trend line's fairly self-evident. Now, if you go onto the BOM site with CSIRO, you can go into, go down the climate change box down the bottom, and then you can go into putting in your local areas, your area, and you can actually put in your town, and then under different scenarios it'll tell you what it's going to be like in the future. So all I did down here was I went to Hamilton, where we're from, and it projects what's going to happen in terms of the variety of weather that you can imagine, and therefore in theory you would design your system accordingly. Now you can do it for where you're at, and you can do it depending on how optimistic you are. If you think that we're going to slow down our greenhouse gases, then you would be able to bring it back. If you think that you don't accept any of that, well, it's just a risk management exercise, you can ignore it and move on. If you also go into that site, that you'll actually get your localised predictions in terms of risk factors for going forward. For our one in Hamilton, the 2030 one is that natural variability, which is the main impact of what we do at the moment. That will still dominate over the greenhouse gas effects, but as you look further out into 2050 to 2090, the greenhouse effects start coming in, and we get, in practical terms, we get a decrease in winter and spring rainfall. There's temperature, and that's at a very high confidence level, which is, they've moved that up now. Temperature will continue to rise, and there'll be warming 2050 to 2090, about 2.4 to 3.8 degrees. So if you remember that slide before, that's using that guidelines. So in base terms, it's going to be warmer. Probably the most difficult ones for them to actually say forward is it's about the extreme heat, which is going to be difficult to manage, and the evaporative rates in your water systems, but there will be fewer frost. So long-term wise, we may be moving into more of a cropping area where we are. Then this is like when I chaired our local catchment management authority for a number of years, and this was quite important obviously to an NRM group. This is your river systems, and it's a very difficult data to look at, but basically brown's not good, which is like life of it really, isn't it? And yellow isn't as bad, but that's about vulnerability. So if you look here, is that Hamilton? Oh, I've lost my sight. Yeah, so we're up here, so we're in this northwest zone. The river systems, the Glenelg and all of this, they're quite vulnerable compared to, in some of these projections going forward, compared to further south and southeast. And the reason I show you this is that this directly relates to production systems that you could or shouldn't run. So, just to go back a little bit on what I just said before, in southwest Victoria we're going to have CO2 result, extra plant growth, good stuff, it'll go up because you've got more CO2. Bad news is it'll be moisture limited, and that's that Horsham trial work they've done in the chambers showed that unless they come up with new grain varieties, you can't get the extra yield even with the extra CO2 unless you have moisture. You get an increase in frequency of hot days, warmer winter, but shorter growing season. Feels a bit like that at the moment, doesn't it? And more variable, well, not the shorter growing season, but the warmer winter for us. We've actually got very good grass production at the moment, although we're looking for a little top-up rain. And more variable rain. The summer rainfall one I think is the most dodgy in the data. I wouldn't back my whole system on it. Now, just to repeat that, this is, comes out of the new rural industry study, which was done in 2010. And what they did was they looked at a whole bunch of things that would be modelled if you did this, if you did that, and if you change your system, if you had wool, you didn't have wool, what would actually happen in the models if things happened. And you've got, I find it really hard to reading this, 2030 modelling, shorter growing seasons, reduced farm gross margins, if that's based on current prices, which were back in 2010, so that may not be 100% accurate because of the increase in both your wool and the protein levels. 2000 to 2009 were not dissimilar to what we had in 2030. Graham Anderson, who some of you may have heard do his climate kelpies, have you seen that? If you want to understand weather, go knock onto that site, Climate Kelpies, it's fantastic. Really simple, they use these weather dogs to show you what's happening. He argues that if we've dealt with 2000, 2009 effectively, there's a fair chance you're going to be right in 2030 if you've been profitable through that period, which you need to reflect on. Stocking rates will need to be reduced to keep the ground cover. We used to work on a 90%, we're moving to 100% ground cover rule now. Changing livestock species seems to have no real benefit, which was interesting because I thought that there would be certain ways you could do with season length that would actually change that, but they didn't find that. So again, chopping and changing is dangerous. Meat production seems to do well in good years but falls in poor years. Wool does give a bit of a little shock absorber in those figures coming out of that, which is a bit of a buffer. Better animals, genetic improvement, that is, will obviously have less impacts. Lot feeding, you know this stuff. You guys, if you're not doing confinement, you're probably not protecting your pasture. Significant advantages, greater winter growth, calving and lambing times marginally earlier. We've actually moved to have a little bit earlier at the moment. And increased scale can reduce enterprise impact, and that's just about benefits of scale, I think. So, what do we do? And this is probably going to take, I'll try to do this in 2 minutes. Up the top was 2005, that's what we were doing, fairly straightforward. The prime lamb was coming out predominantly out of First Cross ewe. Some we bred ourselves, some we sourced locally, some we bought at Narracourt as ewe lambs. 2017, we've gone to 50% merino to merino, and then 30%. I've done this in 100%, so the trees are part of it. I've said the whole land operates, and then the terminal lambs over crossbreds or it's complicated, but some of what we call our old super ewes, which are full merino, but they have some very good meat characteristics. And that's on that trend. And the beef's come out. Last year, in 2016, I had 2 significant events happen in my life, or in our life. I had a heart issue, so I had to have some bypass surgery done, which sort of changes your view of the world a bit. And I had a man in a helicopter land on our front lawn and offer a very good price to buy a lot of our land. And one actually happened before the other. I don't know if it was related, to be honest with you. And as a result of that, we were 16,500 acres, or about 90,000 DSE, and we've ended up selling to him, and we also sold a block to a neighbour to give them a run through, and probably one of our best blocks of land, actually. Which was all in a sort of a readjusting, and 4 kids, you know, all this stuff. They're all adults and trying to work out succession planning, and so it was all coming together at the same time. It's a chaotic period. But it did give the opportunity to sit down, and we had, at that stage, 1/3 of our system was cattle and 2/3 was sheep. And I sat down with a local consultant, and we went back and did our gross margins on all our systems. I was wedded the most to my cattle, if I was being, and probably wedded the least to my merino sheep. And there's a couple in the room who will attest to that. But what did come out through that process is on gross margins for our system, north of Hamilton. So a few qualifiers there. Merino sheep, where you have good reproduction figures, and we're now just on 100% in our merino system, with good growth and good muscle, and particularly selecting for genetic fat, which we're doing all of those things. They came through as the most profitable system we could do by more than $15 on gross margins per DSC. So that was for us at that time, with the genetics we had at that time and what we run. And so we also had the opportunity, if you didn't realise, cattle have been worth a lot of money. So we quit the whole herd, everything stock, lock and barrel, 1,200 breeders, all the followers, everything all went in one hit. And we also sold all our middle and younger crossbred ewes, and we kept that. We're running out our old crossbred ewes, there's a few in the system still. And so it was a decision that we had to. We'd sold, 40,000 DSE of country, and you had to make these decisions. It's a pretty sobering thing to do in a relatively short period of time. And it was based on just sitting down and working with figures and trying to take the emotion out of it. If you were doing an analysis of why we did it, it was because the genetics worked, and we did have lots of markets. That MK market for us is a very considerable market for our merino operation, very profitable, arguably probably our most profitable. And I'll talk about genotypes and feed conversion in a minute while we got there, but it is related. So that's that wool side of it. Now, to make life even more difficult, and this is about to be published. It's actually in the CSIRO, and I've just put it up there so you don't... I don't expect you to, it's a horrible document to read from where you are, but just to show you the Syro Animal Production Sites and the great little trendy title, could say Jigsaw Farms Offsets, but it didn't. It's called Offsets Required to Reduce the Carbon Balance of Sheep and Beef Farms Through Carbon Sequestration in Trees and Soil. And it's Natalie Doran-Brown, myself, a guy called Chris Taylor from Melbourne Uni, and Richard Eckhart, who some of you might have seen do it. They came up and they did a full study of our farms, and we chose the 3 farms at Hensley Park, so that's a block, and that's where we traded all through the drought, all our stock, because we had very good water security there, and it's had a massive carbon footprint put on that in that period of time. And what we found, that's just the data. So again, I've left this up, so if anyone's interested, I'm not sure how they get the presentation. Oh, they get a video, don't they, you said before. But I'm happy if you actually find that document, you can look at it. So what we found was that in key messages really were that 2010, we became carbon neutral. So if you look at those lines just going across there, basically our carbon footprint just keeps going up because we kept all that stock, although it will start to not go quite up as much, but the beef are actually nowhere near as good on the methane conversion for lamb as compared to lamb in our system. So, and that's about fecundatory levels and reproduction. It's quite complicated how we get there, but they will lower that, or they will lessen the increase, is the best way of describing it on those top 2 lines. And the bottom 2 basically is the actual, where the trees are taking off. So there were young trees we put in, and now they're growing. So they're sequestering over time. So it will take, 2010 we were carbon neutral, it will take 25 years to be carbon positive, considering the footprint we had for the first half. So it's quite, I don't want to get lost in it, I can take questions, but it's relatively, the key message is that you've got to sequester what you're actually putting up there if you want to become carbon neutral, unless you go to a whole range of the newer technologies which are coming through in the next few years, and there's no price advantage yet, which is about methane reduction by and large. Okay, now let me go back. So this is the physical farm, and this is probably slightly more interested. So if you were looking at it just for your interest, we've actually sold all that country, which is our better drained and areas, which was a cattle country, to a Wagyu producer who's got a couple of feedlots. This little block we've sold to a young bloke in the room at the moment, just to keep him motivated and interested with us, and he works for us. I'm about to show you a video of him, and which will really embarrass him. And this block we've sold here to this neighbour. The key is this: is if some of you may have been there, this is Helmview, and this is Willandra. They were potter farms, and going back to the 80s, and they were very significant. So if you look through the shops, that's all smaller sheltered paddocks, and that's all about trees. And then we've gone through and put large swags of agro forestry. We've actually, in the potter farms, we've doubled the trees that when we got them since we've actually owned them. So there's actually quite a change. And then this is Hensley Park, which is where the study was done. And you can see the paddocks are bigger. We've now moving into these issues to do with twinnings. And actually yesterday, we just decided a lot of these paddocks are getting sliced up. Darren Gordon will be very pleased to hear this, into much smaller paddocks again in the next few weeks, with a combination of temporary fences and permanent fences, and just trying to get down so we can get down to that 200 U for our twins levels. In fact, we're trying to get even less, down to 100 for some of them. So that's significant in terms of doing it. We've also got a lot more shelter to do. We're only about 80% there. Shelter is king for us. It's putting aside the biodiversity and the carbon, it's quite important. So if we come back to the pasture side, this is lucerne. We haven't had great success with lucerne. I was part of that Evergrow's consultative committee where it was put forward. We were very keen. We had a sort of 15% target for lucerne in the paddocks. We found it quite difficult to manage, and it's a combination of hours and seasons, but it hasn't been quite as robust as we hoped it for. But like this, when it happens at worst. So our pasture system's a Phalaris GT system predominantly, and then with perennial rise running over the top of it when it starts to thin out. we've got pretty keen on keeping our subs, and we manage that accordingly, or if we don't have enough, we go out with them again. Olsen P's now at 20 plus, so we've got very high levels, and that both extends our seasons on both ends, which is how we can do it. This was yesterday. No, it wasn't. This is... I should have said that. That would really piss you off, wouldn't it? We could say anything, really, couldn't we? Yeah, but we don't. So this is cutting for silage. This paddock, the reason I put this in, this is right on the main road. This was sown in 2001, and it's carried 30 to 32 DSE every year. And I'd say, oh, how do you do that? Well, there's a bit of techniques with pasture management, but predominantly there's no secret to it. It's about how much P and K we put out. And I had a massive argument with some regenerative farmers a couple of weekends ago on this basis. But I'm happy to... I don't want to have that argument again. It's a bit horrid, actually. And I'm not sure if I won, which is even also the worst argument you can have. Well, it's hard when you move into a religious movement of people and not based on science. And we do 10% lime per year, and we do a renovation program based on that too. I've seen you, Jason. Trees, I'll do quick. This is cutting, and this is the area you still can crop for those who are interested in crop. That's the ground pins in the background. That's one of our paddocks. This is very quickly what we do with our trees. Salty Creek. We do either this mounded, which are the Agro forestry. If people are interested, predominantly Immaculata. They're very good carbon offset trees. Problem with frost. $16.50 per hectare to get them in, $14.50 for the permanent re-veg, mainly direct seeded, 1,000 stems per hectare. You harvest 220, and I'll go through. This is you can see all the salt area down here. So we can try. These are agroforestry. These are permanent revegetation, and these are the salt areas which will be controlled in time. This is mature. What this is, but this is you get into these nice, pretty poses. This is from the air. This is a summer shot. I thought it was only fair to show that we're not always in green. This is Botryoides, different species, southern mahogany, looking really promising from a timber point of view. For those who've got frost issues, looking really positive. And pruning costs are about an extra $2 per tree, but relatively insignificant when you're looking from between 7 and 9. These are the Immaculata young. These are all matured now. This is the third lift stage, so it's basically $1 for the first lift, $2 for the second, and $3 for the third, because you've got to do the cherry picker thing. This is from the side, top. This is important. Water. Deep storage, not little dams. We lose 1.4 metres of evaporative through evaporation water per summer, and so we've gone for deep water, and then it's pumped through either. This is an air well system. You might just see it there, little PV array and the air compressor line. You're probably familiar with air wells. Fantastic systems, great systems. Bloody expensive systems to run because you've got to use power and your air compressor back in your shed. So we're converting. No, Robbie Fishburne here is not, thank God. This is we're going back to the solar. We've still got 2-inch delivery lines, which help doing it. Super U genetics. This is what we're doing. Maintaining. We're 18.2. We'll let it go up to about 19. We'll cut 5.2 to 5.4 kilos per head. We're choosing on high post-weaning, birth weight 50-55. I think we're actually going to move to about 55 plus, not a lot more, but a little bit plus. Eye muscle, positive for genetic fat. Mark Ferguson's our geneticist, so we have to do that or he wouldn't talk to us. Planar body, especially around the head. This is our wonder ram that we paid a ridiculous amount of money for in WA. I wasn't there, that's why they paid so much money. This is... he's not quite that fat. I've had to stretch him to get into the slide, actually have blue in the background, so I'm being honest. But the key is he's 9.7 weaning weight, 100 days, industry average 1.8. So he's a phenomenal ram, and he's in our stud doing his thing. That's Simon Gubbins' young boy, who some of you may know, that was years ago when he was working for us. We cut a lot of wool. It's still 40% of our income. To take that out, we'd have to move our lambing percentages into the ewes joined to lambs on the ground to 170, 180% instead of 100 to take our wool out of our system. So that's pretty sobering. These are lambs coming through the system. We also have Pole Dorsets go over 40% of our merinos. There's about 25,000 merino ewes, well there nearly is, and we will join 10,000 to an earlier lambing with a Dorset or a white Suffolk, and they're the figures we're looking for there. Feedlot's really important. It's a way of us dealing with it. There's 7,000 lamb feedlot now, and or containment yards is the way I'd say it is. It's all EPA compliant, all the drainage off. It's taken us years to get it there. 4.2 kilos down their throat to get 1 kilo live weight out the bottom. Our early merinos were 220 grams a day. Our first cross merinos are 290 grams a day. Our second cross merinos, if that makes sense, as in they're all merinos, but we're moving in the genetic pool, are going to be 320 to 340. Our first cross ewes with a terminal ram over them were 360 to 420. So you can see that gap is closing. MK job is fantastic for us. We can do a 21-day finish on any scrawny bugger we've got, throw them in there, get the fat cover up, and they're off. And it's a really good out. Then we go through this lambing. Okay, so adaptation challenges. We need grazing systems that are climate responsive. 2030, we're going to have a shorter growing season. So gross margins, what are we going to do? And these are all broader questions which hopefully we've got to. Is there going to be any financial benefit for what we do? And I'm happy to have that discussion. That's from the air. These are the wetlands and trees. These are all growing up now. It's quite amazing actually. There's all really big high trees. Methane, methane's a big conversation. You could have a whole session on methane reduction, particularly with sheep, but I'm not going to get there. Jason's given me 2 minutes. Nice way here is, this is Helmview. This is before we got it. This is salt. This is all this salt scar, ringbark trees. That's it post-Potter. Same spot, same area as from a tower. Another 10 years on. And that's it now, but you can see, and that's all these big broad plantations we've got in. They're actually our lie. That's actually a blue gum plantation. That's us there though. I won't repeat it because you've already got your take home at the beginning. You see, you'll remember all that, won't you? Just as an aside, the thing I didn't mention was quite significant was in that where we had our mixture mix is that 20% release valve in systems, and we really need to look at how we're going to deal with that because we're fully tied up at the moment with breeding ewes. We hit the drought. Gentleman said about the drought this year. We will get ourselves caught. So we're looking at having 20% of system. Wethers don't dry. One of the advantages of the merinos, you can leave them dry and you still get a wool cut. Goats, unicorns, whatever you damn well please. It's going to be there. I was talking to a goat producer a couple of weeks ago, and I had a Muslim driver coming in Melbourne. We went to dinner on Saturday night. We drove down to Melbourne and we went out, and a Muslim driver took us out, and he's just finishing Ramadan, and he's goat mad, and he says he can't get goat in Australia, and they don't like lamb if they're from Southeast Asia and they're Muslims. They don't know. It's talking about the MK job. So goats, I'm not sure if I'm there with that yet. This is we're going to show you a 25-second video to finish. Yeah, this is it, this last thing. If it comes up, just embarrass Jack.
This is a jackaroo. Let's call him Jack because that's his real name. This is a jillaroo. Let's call her Jill because it works better for the purpose of this story. Once upon a time, Jack and Jill met while working on a sheep and wool farm in Victoria, Australia. Every day they went about their jobs, helping the farmer, caring for the sheep, getting their hands dirty and working the dogs to muster the sheep. Then one day, Jack had to work with Jill to find the best sheep to grow the wool that goes into merino snug garments. Guess what happened next? Find out in our next instalment.
So, for those who know, that's a Q reader, if you're not familiar with that. That goes on our wool. Merino Stug. AWN did this at their cost, 100%. Give us a premium for selling that wool to that. It's then mixed with, it's a long chain, comes back through New Zealand, possum in it, makes a very soft fibre, $400 jumpers basically, selling to a very elite market. We've got our tags on it. I get emails from people who have bought them, who've looked up the Jigsaw Farms site and say, we love what you do and all of this. When I'll have a crack at AW, and I think Russell's here, they were fantastic doing this, and they did everything. They had drones. It was poor Jack, who actually manages all our livestock operation, and sold a $12,000 dog at the Kelpie Festival a couple of weeks ago, so he's very wealthy too. Has just had a baby with Em, who also worked for us. He had a baby 3-4 weeks ago. And the reason I'm showing you that is partly to embarrass him, but partly to say we could, in AWN said, do the romance story because that's what will hit people. They want a visual. They're 25-second, 20-year-old to 30-year-olds, high income, particularly Asian ones going through the airport ones. But there is no reason we couldn't do it with other products. If you wanted the carbon story, or if you wanted to do a meat story, whatever you wanted to do, it's cheap technology that really hits that consumer in a really good way. And that's why I put it on, was not to just embarrass Jack. Thank you very much.
Authorised by Victorian Government, 1 Treasury Place, Melbourne.